I used to think the most dangerous thing a person could do was love someone who didn't love them back. I know now that I had it exactly wrong. The most dangerous thing is to be loved, steadily, quietly, without performance, and to mistake that steadiness for indifference. I let my ex stay in our apartment for one night. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a man who trusts his wife doesn't panic over a closed guest room door. By the time I understood what I had actually done, the French press was still on our counter, and my two suitcases were in the elevator going down. My name is Amanda. I am 34 years old, and I know how to read a room, how to make an idea feel inevitable, how to present a version of something until everyone in the meeting believes it was always going to be that way. I have been doing this professionally for 8 years, and personally for much longer than that. My husband Nolan is 37. He runs logistics operations for a regional distribution company, which means he thinks in systems, inputs, outputs, variance. He is organized in a way that used to feel like safety and lately feels like furniture. Always there. Always exactly where you left it. Never surprising you. We have been married for 3 years. We live on the 11th floor of a building with a smart entry system and a lobby attendant who has seen us argue exactly once about a parking permit in the first year and who still greets us both by name every morning. On a Tuesday in early March, I am sitting on the sofa with my feet pulled up, looking at the wet street below through the cracked window when Nolan makes coffee in the kitchen without being asked. He uses the French press, a small glass one he bought in the first month of our marriage because I mentioned, once in the middle of a completely different conversation, that I hated waiting for drip. He has never mentioned buying it. He simply started using it. He sets my cup to the left of the machine where I always stand and calls my name from across the apartment in that way that means it's ready without being a demand. I walk over. He is already reading something on his phone. Later, in the hallway, reaching for my transit card, I find a folded piece of paper in the pocket of a coat I haven't worn since winter. His handwriting, the letter G written the way only he writes it. It says, "The third floor meeting room has no air. Bring gum. I love you." I don't know which morning he slipped it there. I stand in the hallway until I am almost late. Then I fold it back and take a different coat. At 11:23, while I am in the middle of a brand deck review, my phone lights up. The name is Marcus Weil. Something shifts behind my sternum. Not excitement exactly, more like recognition, the way your body knows a song before your brain catches up. He says he has a portfolio show next week. He says he thought of me. I put the phone face down. I finish the review. At 11:47, I turn it back over. The portfolio show was on a Thursday evening at a rooftop bar near a gallery downtown. I told Nolan it was a client networking event, and I gave it a name, a fake agency contact, a made-up brief, and I was specific enough that there was no foothold for a question. I did this on the subway, composing the message, and I was aware while composing it that it was a lie, and I sent it anyway. And what I felt was not guilt, but something closer to relief. The evening was mine, the story was clean, and I hadn't yet done anything I needed to explain. Marcus found me within 8 minutes of my arrival. He was wearing clothes that looked casual and cost more than he would admit, and he was exactly what I remembered. Charming in the way I know how to read, performing attention while also being genuinely curious. Over 2 hours, he fed me back small things. A restaurant we went to once, a city I'd mentioned wanting to visit, a word I always used for a specific kind of person I couldn't stand. He remembered these the way people remember things they have kept. I knew what he was doing. I let him do it. Not because I had decided anything, but because the deciding felt very far away and the bar felt very close. I was home by 10. Nolan asked the next morning, a Saturday. He brought coffee to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress, which he doesn't usually do. He said he noticed I seemed off when I got in. He said he wasn't asking because something was wrong. He mentioned, factually and without accusation, that I smelled different, the way he observes everything, as a discrepancy in the data. He asked if the event had been what I expected, and he held his coffee in both hands while he waited. I said I was tired, the client ran long. It was fine. He nodded and accepted this and went back to the kitchen. That was the first attempt. He asked the right question in the wrong register, clinical where he meant to be caring. And then he trusted my answer, the way he trusts an internally consistent logistics report. If the numbers line up, the document is probably fine. He went back to the kitchen. I lay looking at the ceiling and translated his leaving as evidence that he didn't care enough to stay, which is what I always did with the leaving, even when the leaving was the respectful version. His second attempt was briefer. That evening, over dinner, he mentioned that we hadn't been to a movie in months. He named a specific one I'd said I wanted to see back in January and said we could go Saturday if I wanted. He said it quietly, like an offering. I said maybe. I had a lot going on. He put his fork down and said, very plainly, that the apartment had felt different lately, and he would like it to feel less different. He said this while looking at his plate, which was the most honest version of vulnerability his communication style allowed. I said I was just tired from work. He said okay. He did the dishes while I sat on the sofa looking at my phone, and neither of us mentioned it again. I told Petra about Marcus on Monday morning at the coffee machine. I kept it casual, the audacity of him, the timing, the charm. Petra's face did exactly what I needed. It lit up. She called him literally unbelievable in the tone that means exciting rather than negative. She asked what he looked like now, what they talked about, whether he still did that thing where he gave people his full attention like a gift. Nobody said be careful. Neither of us needed it to be that conversation. On Monday evening, I saved Marcus's number under agency M. Wells. I told myself this was practical. I didn't want a notification appearing with his name visible if Nolan was nearby. I told myself this was organization, not deception, and the distinction seemed real to me at the time. We had coffee on a Tuesday at the place Marcus suggested, near the gallery, with pour-overs that were genuinely good. He talked about a Lisbon shoot, a Prague commission, 6 months in Vienna he was considering. He talked about his life the way people do when the life is interesting, and also when they know the interesting life is the thing you are there to be near. He asked about the marriage carefully, not directly, the way you test a door handle without wanting to seem like you're testing it. I told him things were fine. Fine was both true and not true simultaneously, which is a specific kind of answer that doesn't feel like a lie, even when it is one. That Friday, I came home to a note on the kitchen counter, not in a coat pocket this time, but flat on the counter where I would see it immediately. It was on paper from the Home Office drawer, and it said he would like to take me somewhere that weekend, anywhere I wanted, just to let him know. I read it twice. I set it on the counter. Then I opened my phone and typed to Marcus that the show had been really good and asked if he wanted to get coffee sometime. I sent it before Nolan got home. Marcus responded in minutes, suggesting Tuesday, same cafe. I said yes, and put my phone in my bag, and when Nolan arrived with ingredients for dinner, I told him my day was good, which was almost true. I was 40 minutes late getting home the Tuesday after. Nolan had started dinner, 1 plate set, the second still in the cabinet. He was waiting to know when I was coming. He set the second plate without comment. He told me about a contract dispute at work, and I listened and asked a question and was present in every observable way. Under the table, without knowing I was doing it, I had my phone in my right hand, not checking it, just holding it, the way you hold something you don't want to put down. The dinner party was at the Harmons apartment on the 14th floor, a Saturday in late March with 8 people around a table long enough that Nolan ended up at the far end, beside Simone, while I manoeuvred, gracefully, without appearing to maneuver, into the seat beside Marcus. I say manoeuvred because that is the accurate word, even though at the time I told myself it happened naturally. Simone had sent a seating chart 3 days before for dietary reasons, and Marcus's name was on it, and I said nothing to Nolan because I told myself there was nothing to say. I had known he would be there. I had known it and chosen not to name it, and what I told myself was that bringing it up would make something out of nothing, would signal a guilt I didn't have, would be the overreaction. What I didn't tell myself, because I was very good at not telling myself things, was that I wanted the evening to go exactly the way I was already imagining it. Ruth Andrade was there. She is 61 and has known me since I was a teenager, and she watched me cross the room toward Marcus with a glass of wine in her hand and an expression I couldn't read from that distance. She sat beside Nolan for most of the first hour and said little. Dinner was where I was at my best. I am good at tables. I know how to make a room feel like it is one conversation, how to land the right detail at the right volume, how to make the person next to me feel like they are in the warmest spot in the room. Marcus matched my rhythm without effort. We fell into the specific dynamic of people who once knew each other well, finishing references, competing gently for the funnier version of a story, performing a kind of ease that was real and also calculated and somehow both at once. At some point, I described the period of my life I'd spent with Marcus as the funniest year I could remember. I said it with warmth, not cruelty. I wasn't trying to wound anyone. I was trying to be interesting, which is not the same thing but produces some of the same effects. The table laughed. Marcus raised his glass. I touched his arm, briefly, to punctuate the end of the story. At the far end of the table, Nolan put his fork down and did not pick it up again for a moment. I saw it. I was aware of it the way you are aware of weather. You register it, you file it, and you turn back toward the warm center of the room. He had reacted. He was watching. This was what I had come for. In the part of myself I was not acknowledging, and having it should have been enough. Instead, I added one more detail to the Portugal story. I made the table laugh again. I was performing joy the way I had been performing since I was 9 years old in a new school in a city I didn't choose, and I was very good at it, and it was completely hollow, and nobody at the table could tell. In the elevator going down, just the two of us, the building quiet around us. Nolan asked one question. His voice was flat and specific, and he was looking at the elevator floor when he asked it. Whether Marcus would be at more of these dinners, given that they seemed to share a social circle. It was not a jealous question. The reader of a logistics report would recognize it. He was cross-referencing variables, checking the internal consistency of something that had developed an unexpected entry. I didn't read it that way. I took his arm. I told him Marcus was an old friend. I offered this warmly, like a gift. So relieved to have a visible reaction from him, any reaction at all, that I entirely misread what kind of reaction it was. He nodded. The elevator opened. He said nothing else. Back in the apartment, I made coffee from the French press, standing at the kitchen counter with something to do with my hands, and I set a cup beside Nolan at the breakfast bar where he sat looking at his phone. He didn't look up. I went to wash my face. When I came back, the cup was still where I'd left it, full, and he had already gone to bed. I poured it down the sink. The apartment smelled like rain from the cracked window, the same smell as the first Tuesday morning, that particular rain-on-concrete smell that fills the room when it has rained overnight and the window is open. I stood at the sink for a moment. In the bathroom before bed, removing my earrings one by one into the small ceramic dish I've had since my 20s, I looked at my reflection, and something behind it looked tired, in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. I stayed there a moment, looking at something I couldn't name. Then I splashed water on my face, put the earrings in the dish, and walked to bed. 3 days after the dinner party, Marcus texted. His Airbnb had cancelled at the last minute. He was in the city for 2 more days. He was asking around. He didn't like hotels. He was sorry to ask. I read it at my desk. I put my phone face down. I worked for 11 minutes. When I picked the phone up, his message was still there, waiting for an answer I had already decided before I put it face down. I went to Ruth's apartment first. I chose her deliberately because she was old and loved me and was not going to call a lawyer or post about it accidentally or weaponize it the way newer people do. She poured tea without being asked and listened through the whole version I had prepared. Marcus was in a bind, the guest room door was closed, nothing happened. And Nolan's reaction was disproportionate to what had actually occurred. I said, "What actually occurred," with emphasis, and leaned slightly forward, the way you do when you are asserting a factual boundary. Ruth listened through all of it. Then she asked one question. She asked whether Nolan knew Marcus was coming before he opened the door that evening. She asked it gently, the way she does everything, not as a weapon, just as a question. I didn't answer. She refilled the tea. She said the answer to that question was the whole story. Not because a wife needs her husband's permission, but because of what the answer revealed about the decision she had made before he arrived. About what I had wanted to be true before I said yes to Marcus. I told her she didn't understand the dynamic. She didn't argue. She refilled my cup, and I left angry, and I stayed angry for 2 days, and I did not call her. She had expected this. Nolan was home when I came back early on a Thursday. I had left the office at 3 because a headache was making the fluorescent lights unbearable and I couldn't think through it. I expected an empty apartment. He was in the living room. No laptop, no phone, no podcast playing from the kitchen. He was sitting on the sofa looking at the window. The window faces the building across the street, not a view, and he was not looking at it so much as resting his eyes somewhere, while his mind was somewhere else entirely. I stood in the hallway. He hadn't heard me come in. I asked from the doorway if he was okay, and he turned and looked at me with the expression of someone who has been in a private thought for a long time and has to travel back from it. He said he was trying to understand something. He said this carefully, choosing each word, in the specific tone of someone who has been sitting alone with the weight of a question that does not reduce to a formula. He said he couldn't make sense of the decision I had made. Not the outcome, not the closed guest room door, but the moment before. The moment I had decided not to tell him before I said yes. His voice was not angry. Anger would have been easier. It was something slower. The sound of a person whose model of the world has stopped matching the evidence, who thought he knew the shape of something and is finding it has a different shape. He was simply sad. He was, in that moment, just a person whose marriage was making less sense than it used to, sitting in his living room on a Thursday afternoon with no strategy and no script. I registered all of this. I knew it was real. And then I translated it, the way I always translated things that required me to stay in the discomfort. He was being dramatic. He was trying to make me responsible for his feelings. He was performing injury to make me perform apology. I offered to explain again. I said we had gone over this one night, closed door, guest room. He shook his head once. He went to the bedroom and closed the door without slamming it. He never slams. I have sometimes wished he would. That same week, I noticed his laptop bag had a combination lock on it that I had not seen before. I noticed the car insurance documents were no longer in the shared kitchen drawer where we kept household papers. I noticed something in the apartment's weight had shifted, some organizational gravity redistributed in a direction I couldn't see. I told myself he was being petty, punishing me with logistics the way other men would punish with silence. He was allowed his pettiness. It would pass. Then Petra found me before our Monday stand-up. She was quieter than usual and showed me her phone. A screenshot someone on another team had forwarded from a friend's story. It was a photo from the cafe near the gallery. A Tuesday evening, no context, no caption. Marcus and me at the table, his hand near mine, my laugh visible and specific. Petra asked, for the first time with actual concern instead of curiosity in her voice, whether this was serious, whether I was okay. I said of course not. It was Marcus. It was old. It was a friendship. And I said it with complete fluency, because I had been rehearsing versions of it for weeks. She saved the photo to her own camera roll without thinking about why she was doing it. That evening, I noticed Nolan's car was gone from the parking garage when I went down for something. He had said he was working late. I stood in the garage with my keys in my hand and looked at the empty space and did not call him. I went back upstairs and opened my laptop and worked for 2 hours. He came home at 8:43 with a parking receipt in his jacket pocket from a downtown structure near a neighborhood where, I noted without saying, several law firms had their offices. He went to the bathroom. I heard the cabinet open and close. Later, brushing my teeth, I saw that his hairbrush had been moved 6 inches from the interior shelf of his side of the cabinet to the very edge of the counter, the way things get moved when someone is quietly figuring out which things are theirs. I picked it up and put it back where it had been. Neither of us mentioned it. But in the part of myself I kept in a closed room, I had begun to understand that something had started which could not be restarted. He came home on a Wednesday with a paper bag from the market and put the orange juice in the refrigerator, the one in the glass bottle, the brand I mentioned in passing 18 months ago, and that has been in our refrigerator every week since without either of us ever commenting on it. He put it on the second shelf where it always goes and closed the refrigerator and asked if I had eaten. That was all. He had not said, "I bought this because you like it." He had not said, "I went back to the good market, the 1-2 blocks out of the way, because I remembered." He never said. He simply did, and expected the doing to be enough, and for 3 years it had almost been enough. And today I looked at the refrigerator and could not let it be. To let the orange juice mean what it meant would require me to revise the story I had been constructing for months, the story of a husband who had stopped seeing me, a marriage that had gone quiet as abandonment, a woman who had no real choice but to look elsewhere for evidence that she existed. The orange juice was incompatible with that story. I closed the refrigerator. I went to the hallway and opened my phone and texted Marcus, "Call me." I did this while Nolan was in the kitchen, deliberately, knowing his name would be visible on the screen if Nolan walked out, knowing the call would be audible from anywhere in the apartment. I did not do it from anger. I did it because I needed to create something Nolan would respond to, so I could measure the response. If he said something, if he asked who I was calling, if his voice changed, that would be data. That would be proof of something I could hold. Marcus called back in 4 minutes. I answered in the living room, in the direct sightline from the kitchen, and I talked loudly enough to carry. His Prague gallery, a neighborhood in Vienna, the next project. My voice was warm and easy. I watched Nolan's face for 6 minutes while I talked. His expression did not change. He kept his attention on what he was cutting, steady rhythm, even pace, like someone performing the most ordinary possible version of the moment, which was its own kind of message. It was the most frightening thing that had happened between us in 3 years of marriage. I said when I hung up, "That was Marcus." He said, "I know." He did not look at me. He came to the living room 20 minutes later with the wooden spoon still in his hand, and he stood at the edge of the room, not sitting, standing, which was deliberate. And he told me what he had. He described it in the organized, sequenced way he describes everything. The entry log from the building app, Marcus's arrival timestamp and departure time, the morning after, 40 minutes after Nolan had already left for work. A bar photograph from someone in our mutual dinner circle, showing a Tuesday evening that I had accounted for differently. The fake contact name he had seen on my unlocked phone one morning when a message came through, and the phone was resting face up on the counter while I was in the other room. He laid each item plainly, without adjectives, the way someone describes a discrepancy in a report. Then he asked the real question. He asked what I needed from this marriage that I was going elsewhere to find, and he asked it as a genuine offer. He was not accusing me of a specific act. He was asking me to name the thing so he could try to address it. It was the most honest version of reaching toward me that his communication style was capable of producing. It was, in its way, the closest he had come to saying, "I know something is wrong. Tell me what it is, and I will try." I heard it as a trap. I said his jealousy was his problem and always had been. I said he had never been emotionally present, that he showed up and made coffee and bought orange juice and called it love and left her to interpret it alone. I said I couldn't help it if people found me interesting when he wasn't looking. And then, closest to the truth I would come, I said that Marcus had never made me prove I was allowed to have a life. Almost right. The grievance was real. The distance had been real. His specific limitation, love that existed without narration, without declaration, without the visible evidence she needed, was real. But I had used the real grievance to build a series of tests, and the tests had been designed without a passing grade, and I had just used the truest thing I could have said to him as the sharpest possible weapon, which is not the same as a conversation. He set the wooden spoon on the counter and said with complete steadiness that he would handle things properly. I asked what that meant. He picked up his keys and his jacket and went to his brother's apartment and did not come back that night. I stood in the living room. The orange juice was in the refrigerator. The pan was on the stove, still warm. I began rehearsing my argument, the version I would tell Petra, the structure I had been building. And somewhere inside the rehearsal I reached a sentence. He made me feel like I had to prove I was worth choosing. I had said this sentence before. I had said it to Marcus 3 years ago, across a table in this city, at the end of that relationship. Marcus had left after that. I had always believed he left because he was incapable of love. I stood in the living room and did not complete the thought. I called Petra. I talked to her for 40 minutes. I did not go back to what I had almost thought. At 10:19 p.m., one message arrived. I'll be back Thursday to pick up some things. Please be home. I read it 3 times. Some things. I sat with the notebox from the closet on the sofa and watched the sky lighten without sleeping. And in the morning, I went to the office early and did not open the box. On Thursday, I dressed carefully, not formally, but intentionally, the kind of clothes that communicate that you have not been falling apart. I left the office at 12:15 and told Petra I had a dentist appointment. I had been rehearsing what to say when I saw Nolan. Reasonable, direct, open to a conversation. I had practiced looking like a person who was managing. I came through the building's front doors at 12:31. There was a man near the lobby desk in a grey jacket with a clipboard. He said my full name, Amanda, both names, no variation, in the specific neutral tone of a professional performing a function. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a divorce petition. Temporary orders attached. Financial accounts separated pending formal division. A property schedule. The French press listed in his column, among other items, without commentary. A first hearing date 6 weeks out. His attorney's name on the letterhead. A firm 4 blocks from the parking structure I had noticed his car near 2 weeks ago. I read the first page in the lobby. The attendant examined his desk with great attention. I folded the envelope into my bag and took the elevator up. I sat at the breakfast bar for a long time. Then I called Ruth. I gave her the urgent version, the louder one. Nolan was punishing her for a friendship. The petition was designed to make her look worse than the facts warranted. The legal framing was strategic overreach. Ruth listened through all of it and then said quietly what she had been holding for weeks. She had told the attorney only what she saw at the dinner party, which was someone making a series of choices in front of 8 witnesses. Not a bad person, she said. A person making choices. And you cannot undo a choice by renaming it. I waited for her to say she hadn't seen everything. She did not say it. I started packing. I took the box of coat pocket notes from the closet shelf. I put it between a folded blouse and the ceramic earring dish from my 20s. I took 2 suitcases. The French press was on the counter and I stood in front of it for a moment. It was his, technically. He bought it. I had used it every morning for 3 years. And I left it there. I sat on the bench outside the building. I called Marcus. He answered on the 3rd ring and was warm for 8 minutes. God, that's a lot. I'm sorry, this sounds really hard. He mentioned the Lisbon shoot. He left Sunday. He said he didn't want to be pulled into anything legal. He said he hoped I was okay. He didn't ask where I was staying. He said he'd call when he was back. He hung up with the clean efficiency of someone who has always known which direction he was going. The French press was still on the counter. I was not. Closure snapshot. 10 days later, Petra's second bedroom has a daybed with a bar across the middle that I can feel through the mattress, and a window that faces a brick wall, and a closet door that sticks unless you lift the handle while you pull. I applied for a credit card using my agency salary as documentation. The autumn campaign account I had spent 6 months building was quietly reassigned on a Thursday with no explanation that held up to a direct question. 3 people from the dinner party stopped returning my messages. No announcement, just the particular silence of people who have decided. The notebox is on the floor beside the daybed. I have not opened it. I know every word in it. I have known them for 3 years, and I never told him about the box, never said, "This is what these mean. This is the language I can hear. This is what I needed you to narrate." I kept the notes in a box in the closet, like a private account, and the balance was enormous, and I never told the other person it existed. The hearing is in 5 weeks. Marcus has not called from Lisbon.